Well, Ethan, you do a lot of volunteer work, editing. Um, you do a lot of volunteer work editing for local churches. You also do, you have a lot of experience in producing short films, including some VFX, and you also have sound credit and VFX work that you did on Kestis, a Jedi Survivor story. Um, but primarily, the thing you're most passionate about is writing, and you spend most of your passion and effort on writing screenplays. So I kind of want to get into that and ask you just sort of why. Like, what got you into writing? Why do you do it? Why do you still do it? Let's just talk about that.
See, when I was about 12, I knew I liked writing stuff. It wasn't exactly screenplays. I didn't have any interest in film that much then. It was more about short stories. But I remember I was supposed to take a course on Photoshop and it was full. And so I got switched to a visual effects class because it was available. And that kind of like kickstarted my love for it. But I was interested in movies before because I remember watching Star Wars when I was about 8, watching Attack of the Clones. In the moment Obi-Wan Kenobi jumped out of the window, grabbed onto the droid, and was chased by Zam Wessel. I think that's the moment I decided I wanted to make movies.
That's so interesting.
But didn't like come back to it till I was about 13 that I actually like started pursuing it seriously.
Yeah. Speak more into that. What was it about Attack of the Clones, the Coruscant chase that awakened that in you?
I think it was probably like I knew who George Lucas was and I knew he created Star Wars, but then I realized like somebody came up with this just now. Like somebody came up with a Jedi jumping out of a window, grabbing onto a droid, and someone orchestrated this whole sequence, and it was awesome.
Dude, sometimes that's all it is. I was talking to Wes the other day about the bar scene in Indiana Jones.
The Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Yeah.
I just watched that last night.
You just watched it last night? Yeah. And it's the moment where he walks into it, like, you see his shadow, his silhouette, before the scene really starts. And it was sort of the awakening to the idea that someone had to prearrange how Indiana Jones looked, what his silhouette looked like, what the lighting in that bar looked like, and how all that behaved. And in just sort of understanding, like, oh, like people do this. People do this for a living. People write this stuff. That's interesting. And I think every filmmaker and every writer at one point or another came to that revelation. And neither of us have really been the same since then. You know?
Right.
So we talked about Star Wars, and we talked about how that's something that sort of inspired you as a kid. What are the films that have influenced you since then? Breaking into the film industry feels impossible. Every aspiring filmmaker knows the struggle. Years of passion, countless hours studying cinema, and yet no clear path forward. The industry feels like a locked door and no one is giving you the key. I know that feeling because I've lived it. I grew up captivated by Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Pulp Fiction, Taxi Driver, so on and so forth. I went to film school expecting to walk out with connections and career opportunities. Instead, I graduated with 0 leads and a sinking feeling that my dream was slipping away. Everything changed when I uncovered the key lessons every successful filmmaker eventually learns, but no one is talking about. These lessons aren't found in film school or industry gatekeeping blogs. They came from real filmmakers doing the work, people who have found ways to break in, build careers, and make films outside the Hollywood machine. That's why I created my podcast, interviewing filmmakers from Bradenton and Sarasota who have actually made it happen. They're working, thriving, and proving that a career in the filmmaking industry is possible. Now I'm inviting you behind the scenes. Join my Patreon and get exclusive, unfiltered access to the knowledge and insights that can help you forge your own filmmaking path. Full-length, uncut podcast interviews are available with working filmmakers sharing their real experiences, struggles, and successes. There's going to be in-depth critiques where I break down storytelling, cinematography, and filmmaking techniques in some of my favorite films. There's going to be behind-the-scenes updates on my book, The Lodestar Manifest, There's also going to be a 7-day free trial for anybody who wants to try my Patreon out. There's also opportunities to explore an exclusive one-on-one collaboration with myself where I'll personally watch your film or read your script and give you practical, actionable feedback to elevate your work. If you're serious about filmmaking, this is where you start. Join now and let's create old stories today. Go to patreon.com/Zach Golden.
I don't know, because I'm still trying to find my style. I think there are different movies that influence different projects I work on. So, I'm trying to think. I know After Sun and Lost in Translation were like two big influences on, I don't know, I guess, the one I made with you recently, the Christmas one. So.
Yeah, I see that. I see that in myself a lot, where I couldn't point at a single writer or a single director and be like, I want my work to be the extension of this guy's work. But what I can say is there are different aspects of my personality that resonates with other people's specific works. Whether it's, 2001: A Space Odyssey or Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver and 2001 could not be more different from each other. But I love them both, and they both have influenced me in different ways. So I totally understand that, and like you see aspects of it come out in each of your different projects too.
Definitely, yeah.
Like there's some of my projects feel very different from other things I've done, and it's because the influences were different each time. So I totally get that. But I want to talk about sort of your journey as a writer. You come to this revelation of how movies are made. Attack of the Clones sort of kickstarts that for you. Where do you go from there? Like, do you immediately start writing scripts, or do you, what's your journey like as a writer?
When I first started, it was mainly I'd written smaller things in the past when I was about 10 or 11, and I think I was about 13 when I took the visual effects class. And I thought of myself only as a visual effects artist and maybe a camera person. I knew visual effects was my strength, and because I didn't have much experience in writing, I kind of said I wasn't very good at it, but then also never really tried it. And I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mainly just started writing because it was necessary to have something to film for my visual effects projects.
A means to an end.
Yep. And it was my mom that told me that she thought I was really good at writing. And I was thinking
I love your mom.
Yeah. And she said she thinks I'd be writing books someday, but as a 13-year-old who only wanted to do visual effects, I was like,
as a 13-year-old who's too angsty to actually listen to your mom, you're like, whatever.
I was like, I hope not.
You're supposed to say that, Mom.
But I'm definitely glad she did, because I think that was definitely a catalyst for me believing it's something I could actually do, because it was something I knew I liked, but I saw people who had their strength, and I just assumed writing's not one of my strengths, and so I kind of gave up growing into that strength and growing in that strength until that catalyst moment. So, and from there, I'm trying to think. To this day, I've never written a complete screenplay. I've written a complete outline for a screenplay, but I've made a bunch of short screenplays in that time. And then trying to think where I am in the timeline. I don't know. I guess just writing short screenplays for the film school, not film school, film class for high schoolers that I was in.
Yeah. Cool. So so where would you say you've gotten to at this point, where you're, as far as your strengths are concerned, because you've got a lot of different hands and a lot of different cookie jars. But where do you feel like you stand as a writer right now?
I think one of my biggest strengths as a writer, and I always have room to improve here. By no means an expert, but I think my biggest strength as a writer, I'm trying to think, shaping a story into what it needs to be instead of giving up on it, which is weird because it's weird to say because my procrastination, I'm not giving up on it, I'm just putting it away for way too long of a time.
Yeah.
But I always come back to it and remake it and turn it into what it needs to be. And
What do you mean by turning it into what it needs to be?
if someone tells me it's a bad idea, instead of abandoning it, I shape it into what it, I don't know, into the best it can be. Because I used to give up on this, but now I see this as like, I don't know. I don't want to call it a big strength, but it's something I've gotten better at.
Instead of throwing away a concept or an idea, you mold it into what? A
way that
better
works.
version of itself, or how would you define that?
I like to think it's better. I hope so.
Yeah, we hope it's better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say
Something that works, I guess.
Yeah. Would you say that like you're motivated by concepts? Like you think of something cool, and then you start writing about it, or what does an idea look like in your head?
Definitely, it's about. It typically starts just by like watching. I don't know, just everyday life. Sometimes when watching a movie, I hope it ends like this, and it doesn't. And then like I'm not even paying attention to the movie anymore. I'm just thinking of my own plan. That happened with Jurassic World Dominion. Like halfway through, I heard them say something and I heard it wrong, and I just like made a whole story. But that's one of the ways. Other things like I don't know. Ideas used to be the thing I struggle with. Now I struggle with actually acting on those ideas.
Talk more about that. That's interesting.
About the not acting on the ideas.
Yeah, you don't struggle coming up with ideas. Now it's, what would you say it is, like a commitment to the idea, or
Definitely.
or what?
Just a commitment to writing in general. You asked about my biggest strength earlier, and I think my biggest strength is making excuses.
Yeah. Okay, so you come up with an idea. You know, lightning bolt hits you. What becomes your process from there?
Typically, if I'm inspired, I'll start writing. I always outline first. There's some stories that I know need to feel dreamlike, and so I won't outline. There's some things where I like to go in with like no plan. Most of the time it's with a plan, but there's some
So
rare
you'll jump
instances.
back and forth between discovery writing and outlining.
Yeah, depending on. Sometimes it takes like me trying both to figure out what the story needs. But if it's like one big, if it's, I don't know, like a really vague concept, most of the time it'll become a better story through discovery writing and refining.
You've said something very interesting at two different points in our conversation, and it's you talking about what the story needs, which I feel like is something a lot of younger writers take a long time to discover, is that it's not what the writer needs, it's what the story needs. Mm-hmm. As if the story you're writing is its own entity, its own sort of life, and you as the writer are sort of a means to an end. Mm-hmm. What can you tell me about the relationship between a writer and the story they're writing?
It's interesting. I think it's something I'm trying to figure out. But I know there are times when you need to like not give up on certain elements of the story, but just like recognize like this scene's very cool. I want it in the story, but it's really weird and it detracts from the whole thing. You should be there to support the story because it is your work, but it's still like it's the story you need to like.
Yeah. So you're almost in a position where it's like you have to kill your baby sometimes in order to do what? To communicate a thought or a message, or what do you think the core element is of the story that you're writing?
I think the core should be character, and that's something I struggle with. But like if the characters are consistent and engaging, and if the theme is consistent and engaging, there are other factors, but those are the two main things I'm looking for when I figure out what I need to take away. And whenever I delete something, I always save it like as a deleted scenes. Just like makes it
Speak more into that, because I
makes
think
it easier than
I think that's something I always struggled with. Was I would think of something really awesome, but it doesn't work, and then I would just delete it. I would get rid of it. and never come back to it. Speak more into that, saving those deleted scenes.
Well, I guess I just can't bring myself to delete it sometimes, and I don't know why I didn't think to put it in a folder.
Yeah.
And maybe not exactly to come back to it and make it work, but just to still have it so you're not throwing away something you love.
Yes. Have you ever found yourself going back to those ideas and forming a whole new story from those moments, those deleted scenes?
I can't think of a specific time, but I definitely do go back to ideas I put aside.
Yeah, that's great. So at least when I was growing up and learning how to write, it took me way too long to understand what a theme was.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really have people in my life who knew story very well. And so I would hear a whole variety of definitions on what a theme is, and all of them were different. And so for a lot of my high school years, I had no idea what a theme was or what a theme was supposed to do. What can you speak into as far as what a theme is in a story?
Mm-hmm. This is going to be my personal experience, not an actual definition, because I haven't studied enough to give authoritative advice. But I think it's an idea that connects the story and is used to communicate a message. Not always I was watching an interview recently with George Lucas where he says the main theme is good versus evil in Star Wars, but it's not meant to show you this is why you should never be evil, this is why you should be good. It's not meant to teach a message in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But through the actions, everything in that story conveys the message of good and evil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's it. It is the point.
Mm-hmm.
When people ask me what is the theme of a story, I tell them it's the point.
Mm-hmm.
What is the point of watching Star Wars? There's a whole lot of reasons to watch Star Wars, but I think ultimately it is about good versus evil, and that there's always going to be, no matter how dark things may seem, there's always going to be hope. There's always going to be a spark. And if you don't have a theme, if you don't have a point, then there is no point. Mm-hmm. In other words, the point is the point. So when you write a story, think about what you're wanting to tell your readers or tell your audiences.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want them to walk away feeling or thinking about philosophically?
I think every movie or stories in general will develop a theme in some way, but it'll be a lot better executed if you're conscious of what that theme is. And sometimes if you're discovery writing, it'll just naturally rise. That's what someone told me, you shouldn't start with a theme and it will just arise.
Yeah, some people are different.
Yeah, but for me, I always, I don't know, within the first hour at least of writing whatever it is, I can figure out what I want the theme to be, and it can change. But I know it's going to be one I wrote recently, and I'm still working on making this one into what it, like I said earlier, needs to be, because it's just gotten a lot of
infant stage.
Yeah, I got a lot of feedback on it saying people didn't understand it, and I want to make it best it can be. But it's accepting your circumstances, because I guess this is a spoiler. It's a person who's on a spaceship. He's on his way to colonize a new planet, and he's just trying to wrap his head around his new reality. And then the ship crashes. He gets thrown into space, and he realizes he's gonna die. And the theme is there again. He has to adapt to this new reality. It's two different places, but it's a consistent theme of
adaptation.
Mm-hmm. He wasn't able to wrap his head around it in the ship on the way to the planet. But now that he knows he's about to die, he is understanding everything he didn't understand at the beginning. So that's there are other ways to do it, but that's...
Your theme spills into every moment of your story at that point.
I think it should. Hopefully, there's some
Tell me,
times.
tell me more about that. Like, how does the point of your story get embedded in every moment of your script or every moment of your story?
I think it comes back to cutting out things that don't match. And I'm trying to think. I think overall, if you look at like a line and there are like 5 dots, I'm not saying this is any type of structure.
Sure.
But like each, I don't know, interspaced is like the theme. If you zoom in, I don't think the theme has to be at every part of it. But I feel like it should be tied to the ending. I don't know, this is something that I know people have written on and know a lot more about it than this is just my experience. I don't like when the conclusion doesn't have anything to do with, I mean, I don't think a story can't. I'm sure it can. There's exceptions to everything. I don't like when a story isn't tied to the theme in some way or like add closure to the theme.
Yeah, or it maybe it is, but it's not earned in a way that it feels as though the theme is cohesive. And I think we've seen that many times where we're watching a movie, we're getting invested. Maybe the first act is incredible.
Yeah.
Maybe part of the second act is okay. And then you get to the end and it's like, what happened? Like, what was the point of this whole thing? It's almost like they had a really great idea for a first act, but then they didn't really know what to do with the rest of it, so they just made stuff up. You know, I feel like that tends to be the case with a lot of movies today, is that there's no... The writers don't seem to take to heart the importance of the point of telling stories. You know, it seems like, especially when I look at Marvel, they're not telling stories, they're telling properties. They'll announce a whole list of characters they're going to make movies off of before they even have a script written. And it's like, what are we doing? Are we writing stories about characters, or are we trying to communicate messages and themes here? You know, and I think there's a balance within that. I think character is extremely important, but I don't think, and maybe this is just my opinion, but I don't think a story works if you have an interesting character, but you don't have a point for making your movie.
I think it works vice versa as well. Like, a theme with a character who's underwritten and doesn't make any sense, and like it's just like a chess piece to help you accomplish your message, that doesn't work either.
Yeah.
So
Writing is a balancing act all the way through. All the way through. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to dive deeper into some of this stuff that we've been talking about. I want to talk about writer's block. I want to talk about procrastination and why writers encounter it. But first, we're going to cut the tape because it's Patreon members from here on out. I want to thank Wesley Hamilton, Rachel DeBicaro, Felix Arroyo, Eli Richards, Kangdrew Lee, and Andrew White for being part of the Gen 1 family and supporting me on Patreon. Really appreciate you guys. Also, for any of you writers who are listening, we've been talking about writing scripts and getting feedback from friends and other writing experts, and that's something that I actually offer on my Patreon. Is if you support me on Patreon, I believe it's the $10 tier and higher, you can actually send me your script, send me your short film, your project, and you'll get direct feedback from myself where we can elevate your script, elevate your story to the best version of your work that it can be. And that's just one of many perks that you get on my Patreon page. But this has been The Golden Hours with Zach Golden, and that's a wrap on YouTube and Spotify. And cut.